We can try our first question. Which of the following activities represents a reversible change? All right, so our first task is for us to remember what a reversible change is, right? You may remember that if something can be reversible, it means that we can go back to our original starting material, all right? So let's think about it. If I bake a cake, can I go back to what I started, the materials I started with? Heating a piece of wax. If I heat the wax, can it go back to the original solid wax? Toasting bread and burning a piece of wood. So of those four options, which would represent a reversible change? Okay, let's check out the answer. I hope you have tried the question. Let us see what the correct answer is. Well, if you got heating a piece of wax, then you are correct. Because if you heat wax, as soon as it cools, it will go back to the solid form. All right, let's try another question. Now, this question relates to the unit, the environment. Read this question. So there's a diagram that shows an area of land that a farmer wants to use to plant his crops. And you're asked to choose two methods. So let's look and make sure that we're clear where we are to choose two methods. And it's
the Jamaica Cultural Development Commission that gave and is still giving thousands of Jamaicans their first exposure of talent to a national audience, and their fellow Jamaicans the joy of seeing them perform. No other political leader has studied our culture more, embraced it more, or used the authority of his office to lift every aspect of Jamaican culture to official recognition and esteem. In that respect, I especially remember the tremendous shock that reverberated around polite society when, as Prime Minister, he hosted a revival table at the Jamaica House Garden Theatre. This was part of a three-night revival ceremony that was part of another of his creations, Heritage Week. This event was uncharted territory, a loud and visible endorsement by the head of government of Jamaica, barely 20 years after independence, of an indigenous religion that had been misunderstood, whispered about, scandalized, and even demonized within the Jamaican society. There was no social media then. On one TV station, 2 radio stations, and less than a handful of print media houses. But the speed at which the news flew around the country was nothing short of viral. Beginning with that act as Prime Minister, he moved revivalism from being a curiosity, an aspect of cultural study, to being a properly recognized religion and a legitimate part of Jamaica's cultural heritage, something to be proud about rather than to be ashamed of. I remember this experience with great fondness because later today, nearly 40 years after that revival table at Jamaica House, we will be hosting the inaugural National Revival Conference. The celebration and national recognition of these spiritual and cultural form of expressions come only a few months after the revival pilgrimage to Watertown was specifically documented on UNESCO's representative list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity. It comes 58 years after Mr. Seaga established the Jamaica Journal, which is still published today by the Institute of Jamaica to document and celebrate Jamaican culture. It comes 41 years after his instrumentality in establishing the Jamaica Memory Bank, which is and remains a critical repository of the experiences and practices that make us uniquely Jamaican. I also use this opportunity to share a bit of good news, which I know Mr. Seaga would be very proud to hear. Similar to the inscription of the revival pilgrimage of Wat Town to the intangible cultural list, my ministry has also been working on Port Royal, specifically the sunken city, and it is now inscribed on the World Heritage List. So I proudly report today that I have received the good news from the World Heritage Center that the evaluation team has recommended that our nomination of Port Royal should be accepted for inscription on the World Heritage List in July of this year. Based on this recommendation, we are very confident that the archaeological landscape of the 17th century Port Royal, Jamaica, will become a World Heritage Site. And this has been the dream of the Most Honourable Edward Phillip George Seaga. So this is another win for Jamaica, ladies and gentlemen. This is a part of Mr. Seaga's vision. I'm honored, humbled, and proud not only to have known him, to have been guided and taught by him, and many of us present here this morning have benefited from his guidance, but also to be the inheritor and current custodian of our culture, which includes his vast, rich, and enduring legacy. I welcome you on this great day that the Lord has made, a day on which we celebrate the life and continuing impact of the Most Honourable Edward Phillip George Seaga. May his name and good works endure forever. God bless you all.
Thank you very much, Minister Green. Thank you very much, Minister. The Prime Minister, Dr. the Most Honourable Andrew Holness, for his reflections.
Thank you very much, Mr. Master of Ceremony. Allow me to adopt the protocols that have been well established, but permit me to acknowledge the Most Honourable Carla Seaga, representing the family. It is a deep honor to once again stand here in the sacred grounds to a man deeply woven into the fabric of Most Honourable Edward Phillip George Seaga. Affectionately known as Blind. Desmond, I rebuke you. Today, on what would have been his 95th birthday, we do more than honor his memory. We recommit ourselves to the values he stood for, the institutions he built, and the people whose lives he changed. Edward Seaga was not merely a political leader. He was a builder of systems, of structures, of dreams. He believed in the power of government to serve the people. And he worked relentlessly with discipline and precision to turn that belief into reality. Born in 1930 and brought home to Jamaica just 3 months later, Edward Seaga's life was one of total dedication to Jamaica. By age 22, he had already made a profound declaration of loyalty, renouncing his US citizenship in favor of full Jamaican identity. Not a rare thing to do, and he did it not out of convenience, but out of conviction. He believed that he could only serve one flag, and he chose our flag. He chose Jamaica. He did not wait until it was a political necessity for a convenient political ambition. Edward Seaga was a man of deep intellect, but also action. Though trained in sociology and anthropology at Harvard, his academic knowledge never stayed locked in an ivory tower. It was translated into policy, into programs, into institutions that have become part of Jamaica's national architecture. We often speak of leaders who had vision, good intentions. But Mr. Seaga had more than a vision. He had follow-through. He had the discipline to design the machinery of government to match the intention, to match the vision and the good ideas. But what I admired most about him was that he had the courage to confront inherited limitations and the will to execute. So all leaders will come to you with good intentions, and you will hear a lot of good intentions in the promising season. You will hear a lot of promises and eloquently expressed visions. But the real test of the leader is the ability to transform those good intentions into reality. And indeed, that's the idea of transformation. So you could say then that Mr. Seaga was a transformational leader, which is a step above a visionary leader. But you would also have to give him credit as a courageous leader, because he was willing to confront many of our deeply held and deeply seated perspectives that really formed our limits. He saw more in us than we saw in ourselves. He challenged us. He confronted us. And he didn't care too much about popularity in doing so. And in today's world, as I suspect in all times, we need leaders who care about the people more than themselves, more than their popularity. I will return to that point a little later on. But to reinforce the current point, which is Mr. Seaga as the builder, the transformational leader, the institutionalist, it is important to repeat, and I see many youngsters in the audience. I'm at that age where I can refer to people genuinely as youngsters. The Jamaica Stock Exchange, that was one of the institutions built by Mr. Seaga in 1968. The Jamaica Mortgage Bank in 1972, the National Development Bank in 1981, which is now the DBJ, the Exim Bank in 1986, Jampro in 1987, the UDC, which developed the Kingston Waterfront, Ocho Rios, Negril, the Heart Trust NSTA in 1982, training hundreds of thousands of Jamaicans. That's just a small part of his legacy. On the social side, the JCDC, which is the promoter of our national festival, the National Gallery, Things Jamaica, and Devon House. Just some of the institutions that he has created, which defines the architecture of Jamaica today. Mr. Seaga was a warm and humorous person. Many persons would not know this, would not have gotten to see this side of it, because the public would see him as so focused on building. But you know, if you had the opportunity, as I did latterly, and others who are here would have been with him from they were children. Minister Mackenzie and Minister Grange and others. Certainly Minister Mackenzie regaled us with stories how he got a beating from Edward Seaga. To show you how long he was associated with Mr. Seaga from he was a boy. So, and you would have heard Desmond say that Mr. Seaga was his father. And that is genuinely and truly the greatest compliment that you could pay to anyone. So those of us who knew him personally could attest to his humor. I prefer to use the term wit, which would be a probably more apt description. But he was also very warm and very caring. But he was also a keen debater. He never shied away from controversial topics. And when I came into his office much later, when I suspect he would have mellowed a bit, I did try to advise him against getting involved in certain public debates, but to no avail. Mr. Seaga believed in confronting issues, taking them on, and speaking truth to power. He believed in putting the full story. And Mr. Seaga also loved music. And I suspect that's where Minister Mackenzie and Minister Grange got their own liking for music. And on my way in, a radio station was playing Oh Manny Oh, a hit that he produced, and acknowledging Mr. Seaga's contribution to music in Jamaica. But apart from that, I wanted to highlight today a part of Mr. Seaga, of his contribution to Jamaica, that is not always readily appreciated and recognized. And I thought that this morning I would broach it. You know, ever so often, the world goes through phases of profound change. After World War II, the world went through a series of profound changes which created several institutions that currently define the global order. And some people may remember a phrase that was used to describe a difference in world outlook, the Cold War. A battle of ideas and philosophical outlook. And Jamaica, as small as we were part of that global contention. And Mr. Seaga stood very strongly for one perspective on human development. He stood very strongly for freedom, for democracy, for liberal democracy. He stood for markets and competition. He stood for human rights and the respect of individual freedom. And it was not always easy to do. It was a time when many Jamaicans paid with their lives. It was as if the country were in an undeclared civil war. There was a state of public emergency where many Jamaicans, one of them I know definitely sitting here in the audience, was detained and then had to leave their country. Many of them spent many months forced to leave the country. And were it not for the strength, were it not for the determination, were it not for the courage of Edward Seaga, Jamaica may have gone in a direction which today we now know that we would have lived to regret. It is not a part of our history that is well understood. It is not written about too much. And as we honor Mr. Seaga on his birthday, one of the things that we need to do, we meaning now those persons who carry on his legacy, we need to properly put that era into context and put Mr. Seaga's contribution into context so that the generations coming can have a better understanding of what truly took place. And it is very important because there is a concerted effort of revisionism to try and write history in the way it did not happen, otherwise called propaganda. So, in many ways, Mr. Seaga's life was a bridge between eras, between disciplines, between different aspirations, but fulfilled with action. So as we lay this floral tribute today, we do so not in mourning, but in affirmation of a life that continues to shape our own, of a legacy that calls us to build on what he began. And the best way to honor Mr. Seaga is to carry his work forward, to protect our institutions, to invest in our people, and to dream with our eyes open. Thank you, Mr. Seaga. Jamaica remembers you, Jamaica thanks you, and Jamaica continues your work. May his legacy live on in the lives that we continue to improve, the institutions that we continue to build, and the nation we continue to strengthen. Continue to choose Jamaica. God bless you.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. And now it's time for the laying of the floral tributes. Mr. Dwight Richards will play the trumpet during the laying of the floral tributes. I now invite the Prime Minister, Dr. the Most Honourable Andrew Holness, to lay the first tribute. Thank you, Prime Minister. And now I invite Dr. Angela Brown-Burke, the opposition spokesperson on foreign affairs and regional affairs, who's representing the leader of the opposition. Thank you, Dr. Burke. And now the Honourable Desmond Mackenzie, the Minister of Local Government and Community Development and Member of Parliament for Kingston Western. Thank you, Minister Mackenzie. I now invite Mr. Robert Montague, the Chairman of the Jamaica Labour Party. Thank you, Mr. Montague. And now Mr. Donovan Williams, the Member of Parliament for Central Kingston.
Take my love forever.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. And now His Worship the Mayor, Councillor Andrew Swaby, Mayor of Kingston. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We'd like to use this opportunity to specially recognize special guests with us this morning, Bishop Robert Clark and Bishop Patricia Clark from Wattown, Bishop Livingston Johnson, Archbishop Rupert Bourne from the Revival Diaspora Mission, Latoya Johnson, and they're all members of the United Zion Revival Council of Churches, who will be hosting the inaugural Revival Conference at 10 o'clock at the Randy Williams Entertainment Center. Dwight? So the conference starts at 10, and after that they'll have a revival service. If you have never been to one, they're inviting you to come. It's at 6 o'clock.
So, you know that Mr. Seaga love him scare. So we're going to be doing some scare, and we want to see you scare. Just for a couple seconds. You ready? We're going to scare. You ready for scare? But you can't sit down and scare. You have to get up and celebrate scare. So here we go. You want me to use this mic instead? All right, I'll use this. Scare. Mr. Prime Minister, that's not scare, sir. Here we go. Turn it up, turn it up, turn it up. We're gonna come on, get up and down, sir. Get up and down. We're celebrating Mr. Seaga. Come on. A little movement in the bones. Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on. Oh, Miss Gary, go bring, come on, yeah. Talk to me. Oh, bring mystery. Oh, Miss Gary, go bring, come on, yeah. You bring misery. Mr. Mayor, are you ready? Oh, going from house to house, making disturbances. Chippy, 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 chippy. Time you stop doing those things, you old Mrs. Yak, man. The big shall inherit the earth. Chippy, chippy, you old Jezebel. Oh, we don't like to see You're making disturbances. Help me sing now, help me sing. Time will tell on you, you old Jezebel. Dr. Brown Burke, you ready to dance? Long shall the wicked reign over thy people. Come on! If I had a wing like a dove, if I had a wing, everybody on the tent, here we go. I fly, oh mama fly. Chibby, 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 chibby. All right, stop it now, stop it now. Have a seat, thank you.
Thank you. We're all warmed up now, right? We continue with the laying of floral tributes. I now invite the Most Honourable Mrs. Edward Seaga, the widow of the Most Honourable Edward Seaga. Mrs. Seaga. Mr. Christopher Seaga, the son of the Most Honourable Edward Seaga, is unable to be with us this morning. Miss Charmaine Anderson and Miss Veronica Sewell will lay the floral tribute on behalf of Christopher Seaga.
We may make it together.
Mrs. Prudence Kidd Deans from the National Organization of Women, JLP Now.
Get together the way old man.
Thank you, Mrs. Kid Deans. And now, ladies and gentlemen, Mrs. Anne-Marie Spence Heron, the president of the Tivoli Gardens Football Club. And now Mr. Christopher Bovell, the board chairman of the Edward Seaga Research Institute.
Tomorrow we will make it together the way old friends do.
Thank you, Mr. Bovell. And now Mr. Shane Carr, the president of Generation 2000. Thank you, Mr. Carr, and thank you, Dwight. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we have a special tribute from the West Kingston constituency, led by the Member of Parliament, the Honourable Desmond Mackenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Most Honourable Prime Minister, my mother, Mrs. Seaga, my cabinet colleagues, His Worship the Mayor, West Kingston family members of the Diplomatic Corps, ladies and gentlemen, happy birthday to the Most Honourable Edward Phillip George Seaga. This year's celebration is one I'm feeling much better than in previous years. 95 years, but we still love, cherish, remember, preserve the legacy of, for me, one of the most outstanding political figures of the last 100 years, Edward Phillip George Seaga. As a constituency, we continue to be grateful. Grateful for the efforts that he made in making our lives better. I speak today as a proud son of Edward Seaga. And I know I share the sentiments, Dawn, all of us, Babsy. Just reflecting earlier on Mr. Seaga's contribution to West Kingston. The last item that will be performed this morning is a dance item by the Tivoli Dancers. 51 years ago, when JCDC was established, West Kingston has won more medals in festival than all communities in Jamaica put together. Just this festival alone, more than 25 medals, including national honors in dance, has been achieved by our cultural group in West Kingston. We are proud of him. We continue to cherish his memory. We will never let you down. You chose many years ago to stay with us through thick and thin. We pledge our support to you and to your family to build on your legacy. You chose West Kingston. I ask Jamaica to choose what Edward Seaga has built over the years, and let us all collectively build on his foundation to make Jamaica a better place. So, ladies and gentlemen, I will take the privilege of the Master of Ceremony to invite the award gold medal winning Tivoli dancers to come now and to perform. Thank you.
One more round of applause, please, for Tivoli Dance Troupe. I now invite you to stand as we observe a moment of silence. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. You may be seated. It's now left to me to extend gratitude on behalf of the Minister, the Honourable Olivia Grange, and the Ministry of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sport, as well as the production team of the Jamaica Cultural Development Commission, to the participants, including all tribute layers, all performers, Bishop Shamar Miller for the prayers, members of the Jamaica Defence Force and the Jamaica Constabulary Force, the team from the Office of the Prime Minister, Chancery and Protocol Division, the Creative Production and Training Center, Medicare Ambulance, the Jamaica National Heritage Trust, members of staff of the National Heroes Park, members of the media, Gorgeous Flowers, the florist, and all other supporting teams. Thank you very much for joining us in the celebration of the life and work of the Most Honourable Edward Seaga, Jamaica's 5th Prime Minister. Have a great day.
Mr. Seaga, I want to thank you for agreeing to sit and having a frank, open discussion with us about your life and your work. Now, before we delve into all of that, I want to know, and I'm sure others want to know, where were you born? I remember an anecdotal story when I was a child that said you were born on a plane traveling from Jamaica to the US, so we weren't sure where you were actually. Were you Jamaican? Were you from the United States? Can you set the record straight?
I haven't heard that one. I've heard other versions. I was actually born in Boston, where my mother and father were living at the time. She had migrated with her family, and he, because of the affection that he had for her, followed some time after. But then, about the time of the Great Depression, which is 1929, they had to take a second look at what's going to happen there, and they decided to come back to Jamaica. Well, when they did that, it was in 3 months after I was born in 1930.
So you spent your formative years here. You went to
Yes.
prep school here, and you went to Woolmer's Boys.
That's right.
What was it like at Woolmer's?
I'm always grateful to Wilmus for giving me the opportunity to manifest some of the characteristics that I have, in particular that of discipline. I was a prefect, and I was captain of one of the houses. And it gave me responsibilities with a number of transgressions that could be committed by boys, that you could give them what they call an imposition in order to get them to know that they mustn't do it again. And that was, write me 50 lines from this book, or that sort of thing. But it gave you an ongoing operation to see the reaction on their side and to measure how far you can go and what do you need to do to really get a change.
Were you also involved in sports?
Oh Lord, yes, too many. I was 5 of them.
What did you enjoy the most? Which sport?
I enjoyed cricket the most, and I was nearest to national ambitions when I had to leave to go to Harvard, because the time when you ripen is about from then on, a little further. So Jackie Hendricks came to the front and he became the national wicketkeeper. But the one that I did best in was a rifle, where I had a Jamaican national record for the small bore, 22 caliber, 199 out of 200. It stood for many years.
Okay. You went to Harvard. I think you went there initially with dreams of becoming a nuclear physicist. Is that correct?
I was fascinated by the world that was exposed to me at the time of the war, when the nuclear bomb was exploded. And I sent abroad and got a book to read more about it. And I was fascinated by the whole business of the planets and the molecules and the atoms all having this action and reaction on the other. And that's why I looked at nuclear physics as something that I would be very interested in. But it didn't turn out that way, because to get to the point where it gets interesting is a long haul. And I was too impatient. I wanted something where my brain could be used early, and I could apply it with my own thinking, not to be learning of what others did. Although they were important, of course, very important. But I wanted to put my own brain to work.
And
so I switched to the social sciences.
Why? Why the social sciences?
Well, it gives you a chance to use your surrounding as the drama, as a theater, and to determine people who are part of that drama or that comedy or that excitement, fits up into pieces of the personality, and together they are a unit in a society. And with all of that, they also practice a culture of their own. And in all of these things, you get feelings that not only enchant you, but you get feelings as to what you'd like to see done.
You're an expert in Jamaican anthropology, that is, an expert of human societies, cultures, and their development. On your return to Jamaica, after leaving Harvard in 1953, I gathered you got a grant fund which sent you off to do a study on Jamaican spirit cults.
Yes.
Right. And that is how you ended up in Buxton Town? Is that it?
No. I'd already been to Harvard and come back. And I read one morning of a lady who had arrived in Jamaica, who was one of those people who could foretell the future, and was said to be able to be receptive to spiritual talk and that sort of thing. And she was in Montego Bay vacationing. So I decided to go down and to talk with her. And when I went down, and it's a lucky thing that I did, I saw it all in action. The waiters and everybody wanted to touch her, and if she would please hold this 2 and 6 pence piece, or anything that they could get to take away a handkerchief and all that. A celebrity. So I got a chance to talk to her about what I was doing. And she was very pleased to hear that, because they had not known anything about Jamaica's spirit world. And they were on their way to Haiti. They'd only stopped off in Jamaica. So she said, well, come with us to Haiti, because we're going to learn about voodoo. And I went. It was only for 2 or 3 days. It was actually making arrangements to go back. And I went with them. Didn't get to learn too much because it's a short time. But I saw how much attention was given to that local religion, and how it was held in such awe that it made me wonder if we would ever come the day when our own feelings for Zion and revival, Pocomania, would ever be accepted in that way and looked at as a national religion. And that's why I came back to practice with it.
Okay. And you went to Boxton Town. Boxton Town is close to Bogwalk in that area.
Yeah, between Bogwalk and Linstead.
Right. What was it like in Boxton Town?
What a lovely little spot. It's one of those spots that you dream of when you think of country. You know, you want to go somewhere like in the country for a weekend. Every kind of fruit tree. Little ridges, little gullies, little plains and little lanes. And such wonderful people. I had a time of my life in terms of exploring the people's life, how they lived, and they could get to ask me questions as to how I lived. So I was teaching them and they were teaching me. And it was a wonderful occasion.
I gather when you were in Boxton Town, when you just got there was some amount of anxiety because you drove a black Vauxhall car at the time. And the children were afraid of you. And you noticed that they were always running away from you. And then what did you find out? Why it was that they were taking that approach and hiding from you?
Well, when that happened, I reported it to the lady who was a teacher, retired teacher, and the postmistress, who lived in the community, had 2 little girls. Her husband lived in Kingston and worked. And I told her about it. And she said, well, what were you doing? Why they were running away? I said, I had some sweets in a bag and I was giving out the sweets. She said, wow, that made you a black heart man. I said, what's a black heart man? She said, a man who goes around giving out sweets, drives a little black car and catches the children, take them away and cut out their heart. I said, my God. Next thing, somebody come and report that I'm trying to capture them. So I had to suspend everything for a while and think out a new strategy. And the new strategy worked because I was of great use to them with that little car. And I took them on expeditions to Agricultural Society fairs and things like that. And I went around interviewing the householders, mostly the ladies. And I did my work and they did theirs. It was such a lovely place.
You worked and lived in the community, which was not the norm. But at that time, we found out something else about you, which is that you like roasted jackfruit seed and that you also play the mouth organ. I gather you used to sit with them and play music and stuff.
Yeah, my father used to play the mouth organ, and I took it up. And I could turn a good tune on it. Unfortunately, I would love to have played other instruments, but I didn't have the knack with the left hand. So I used the mouth organ wherever I was. I carried one with me. And on this occasion, I went up into the hills above Boxton Town, where the men were working in their farms. And one man was digging holes for planting the yams. And what you do on that day, when you're digging holes, you get everybody else to come and dig with you. So it's called a digging sport.
Yeah.
And when they're doing it, you return a gesture. And then when you're digging, they're singing digging songs. They don't have any instruments, and they don't use instruments, just their voice. And they make a sound that gives you a rhythm. We had a great time. So much so that at the end of the evening we had to have a little white rum. Now, for me, I've never had white rum before. I took my portion of it. I felt it all the way down to my toes. And when we were leaving, coming off the hill now, I was in the front playing the mouth organ, and the men were behind me, sort of not marching, but jogging down and singing. And it was a lovely occasion.
that could have been a precursor to your involvement in the music industry. I gathered you put out an album in 1955 of ethnic songs, and then you started your own label, WIRL.
Yes.
A label that was successful. It put out in 1959 a song by the duo of Joe Higgs and Roy Wilson, Manio, which sold a whopping 30,000 copies, I'm told.
I'm not too sure about the number and how that compared, but the people tell me that.
Mm-hmm. I wanted you to listen to the song and tell me the memories that it brings back for you. What does that bring back for you when you hear that blue beat song?
It's a very unique beat. Matter of fact, one of the top artists today came to us to ask if they could use the rhythm, and we made a deal with them. Assassin.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't go directly into that form of music. What happened was I decided to get into the music business when I did the albums that came out of my folk experience. But those kind of albums just did not sell. The public wasn't interested. And they kept asking me, the people behind the counter, what about Johnny Mathis? What about this one and that one and all the favorites? And I said, well, if that's the case, I may as well import those. And I started to import them, and they went like wildfire. It was a very good time for me. But it was also about a time when Jamaican music was beginning to emerge. You could hear it not on the radio at that time, and that's important, but you had to go to places where the recordings were being played, and you'd hear the music. And Ver Johns was an impresario, and he had a competition that singers participated in, I think weekly or monthly, whatever it is, and the winners would get prizes, and many of them would go on to get contracts to do more singing. And that was how I heard of Manio, because Ver Johns was a good friend, and he told me about this song. And it just so happened that at that time, there was a competition, there was a performance at the Ward Theatre of different artists, like how you have a show now. And they were the guest artists. And I went there and I heard it, and I said, yes, I want to do that. This is not my first local record, but this is my first local record that is a local record. The others were other records that had roots abroad. And having done that, it was very successful. And so I continued to go, but it was at an odd time. It was 1959, 1960, 61. I was also developing a great interest in the political life of the country. It was the time of the referendum, and I had an inborn feeling that Jamaica could do it alone. And when the decision was made by Sir Alexander Bustamante that we would go it alone, I was there right with him. And so I continued by entering the campaign for the referendum, which was won by the Jamaica Labour Party. And thereafter they won the election that took us into independence. So a lot of other things were happening. In other words, I was being introduced to politics at that time. I didn't have an intention, but I just liked what I saw and what I felt. And I thought it would be a useful platform for the things that I had learned in the communities in which I lived, to be able to use those examples and make national projects out of them.
One of the things that you did around that time, I'm thinking about 1961, was that impassioned speech, the haves and the haves not.
Yes.
Could you tell me, how did that come about?
Well, it just came to me really as something that I could do in Parliament. I was in the Senate at the time. It was called the Legislative Council then. But it wasn't something that I planned. It had just happened to me on a weekend. And I started to map it out in my mind because I had seen it now. I had seen the haves and the have-nots. I came from the background where people would say, well, you're a have. It wasn't really so, but nonetheless. And the have-nots were all around me then. And I had that opportunity to see how they lived, what they ate, how they got clothes, their entertainment, schools, everything, their whole life. Because I didn't go in the morning at 8 o'clock and come out at 4. I slept there. I had a little house that was just built, coincidentally. And I had the opportunity to rent that house and live in the community. And a lot of things you learn that goes on in the early part of the evening, the telling of tales for ring plays and other things like that. So it was a much richer experience than if you went in to ask questions from a questionnaire.
You were appointed to the Senate, the youngest, well, it's now the Senate, but it was the Legislative Council at age 29.
That's right.
At age 30, you were part of the group that helped to draft the Jamaican Constitution.
Yes.
At a young age, 30.
That would be right. As a matter of fact, it was before that, because I was in the Legislative Council for a period when the Constitution was being drafted, before we had that election in which I won my seat and I was a member in the House. And it gave me an opportunity to see another phase. You see, I had never taken any courses at Harvard in government, in history, in law, economics, any of those things. I had to learn them all on the run. And it gave me a wonderful opportunity to see how the Constitution becomes the highest law of the land and what discipline it brings to the framework of normal law. And that opened my mind now to the field of politics as a system which plays a role within the Constitution. And I wanted more to get more deeper into politics because of those things. And that's what I did. I was a candidate in the 1962 election, won it, and won it ever since.
Now, before we go on, as it relates to the Constitution, since you are the only living member of the founding fathers of Jamaica, since the time of the Constitution that was drafted, you have spearheaded a number of initiatives that have made adjustments to that Constitution, to what was before. You initiated, among other things, a rewrite of the human rights section of the Constitution to perform for a Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedoms. What else did you think, or what else did you think was in need of adjustment, and you helped to make that adjustment?
Well, what we did, we thought have been sufficient. Those were days when you didn't have to lock your doors. You didn't have any maltreatment. People had problems sociologically, but they weren't of the tragic and horrendous nature that came about in the later years. So I didn't think that there was anything wrong with the Constitution as it was drawn. But as we went along, and when we got to the state of emergency in 1976, I realized now this can't be normal. There's something going on here. And in seeing what was happening, the way in which it was invoked one-sidedly with discrimination, and the reason for it being revoked was to stop the JLP's campaign, which was creeping up on Manly's position and was almost in the same position in points in the polls when they brought on the state of emergency and started locking up people without, well, they should have had a permit to do so, but they didn't use the permit. The minister pre-signed the permit and gave it to them and said, go out now. And they go out and lock up people who were more partisan to JLP than PNP. Not entirely all the cases, but definitely so. So that when the election came, a lot of our agents had been locked up. We had to find new agents, and you don't just find a new agent like that. So it was a great hazard to us. And I said, this can't continue. And I took that feeling with me right through the 80s. And in the 90s, I got the chance to express how I felt about it and what ought to happen to give everybody human rights and to respect them.
And so you had not only the adjustment to, in terms of the human rights section of the Constitution, there was the creation of the post of the public defender and curtailment of some of the powers of the Prime Minister to provide a better balance of power between the executive and the Parliament in the Jamaican system of governance.
Yes. Now, the Constitution means far less without a public defender than it means with a public defender, because the public defender is the person who leads you to the prosecutorial position if some infringement of the Constitution occurs. And he or she takes up that position when they see the reports that come into them with complaints and so on. That then leads to the holding of the hearing of it in a court of law, and decisions are made. Without the role of the public defender, it wouldn't get that far. A lot of important changes were made at that time. The situation did not continue as it was, when you could simply go around and hold on to somebody, put them in the back of a car or a van, take them and lock them up. What happened? We rewrote that section of the Constitution to say that if you call a state of emergency, you can do so unilaterally for 2 weeks and 2 weeks only. After that, you have to go to the court and prove why you have asked for the state of emergency. And it is in the proving of that area that it usually falls apart if it is a false call for a false call for a situation like that. So on that basis, we were able to correct most of the other weaknesses in the legislation, and today we have a very strong code that looks at that.
I'd like to look at your role now as a social reformer. As Minister of Welfare and Development in 1962, you helped transform one of Kingston's worst inner city communities, Tivoli Gardens, into a model community. What other social reforms did you spearhead?
What other?
Social reforms.
Oh,
did
Lord.
you spearhead?
Let's talk about a couple of them. My biggest social reform was heart. Because in the villages that I lived and in the inner city areas, these young boys were coming up, and when they reached the end of their period in school, at that time it was 15 years old, you're out on the street. You're out of the yard. There's no training of any sort for you unless you were really quite a very, very bright young man. And they had different grades of examinations that you could take that could prove that. So I said something has to happen to give them a chance. And heart, the structure of heart came to my mind. Because if you had academies, workshops, places of learning where they could be taught a skill, that's all any mother, that's what she wants her boy to get, a skill. And she would take him to the local carpenter to be trained. And the poor youngster will be there for 1 year doing sandpapering, getting nowhere. So this came along so wonderfully as an opportunity for the young people. I call it the University of the Poor. And it has proven to be the case. Thousands and thousands of young people have passed through it in different skills, not building skills alone in cosmetics. Wonderful training operation they have there. In hotel work, we have a small hotel that I bought that was a clubhouse. And in clerical work, in agriculture, and many other skills. Now they've added information technology, so that there's a whole range of skills. And what is better than that? In the past we had to just do grade 1, or take you to the first point in the curriculum, because you're only there for a year. But now you can go to grade 2 and 3, by staying on, if you have the capability of doing so, and really come out to be quite a trained young person. I've met Hart graduates in many, many places in Jamaica. I met them even at the airport in the United States while I'm waiting on a change of flight. And the young man came up to me and asked me if I was Mr. Seaga, and I said yes. And he said, I just want to tell you, sir, that I am here because I went to Hart. I felt good. I felt very good.
You were being very modest, Mr. Seaga, because aside from that, you have had a whole range of achievements. I can read a whole list. You were responsible for Things Jamaica in 1963, the Jamaica Festival Commission, the return of Marcus Garvey's remains to Jamaica in 1964, several museums, including the Arawak Museum, and Port Royal. The introduction of National Heritage Week, Creative Production and Training Center came out of your work, and the Media Divestment Program to establish several radio stations and television stations in Jamaica. And that is just the tip of the iceberg of what it is that you have done since you have entered politics. Another thing that you have done is you have put in place a number of things that have helped to strengthen Jamaica's economic position. For example, the Jamaica Stock Exchange. You were instrumental in that, and you were instrumental in a number of other local financial institutions. Could you tell us about some of those?
Well, insofar as the financial institutions are concerned, I introduced a number of different types of financial institutions, covering most of the whole panoply of things that can be done. Merchant banks, a mortgage bank, the what would have been called abroad a mutual fund, but here we call it, forgot the name.
Unit Trust?
Yeah, that's right, Unit Trust. And with all those, you broaden the extent to which people could invest and get the opportunity from that investment to build and to grow. That came about as a product of the fact that when I took over the Ministry of Finance after Donald Sangster died, it came to my attention that practically every bank in Jamaica was foreign owned, and every insurance company virtually was foreign owned. I said, we're independent now. We can't allow you or the only people to decide our fate at your boardrooms abroad. We want to have our say, and we want to have the right to use our money that you're saving and our money that you're investing. And I spoke to the banks. They didn't give me any great big argument. I told them I want to see shares from your banks being put on the stock exchange so that Jamaicans could buy them and own a piece of the action. I spoke to the insurance people. They were a little more resistant, but when the time came for them to make a decision, they made a very big decision. They decided to sell all of the company to Jamaicans. And so we ended up with a number of companies in Jamaica that were foreign-owned in insurance, that became Jamaican-owned. Island Life, for instance. Life of Jamaica had started just before that, but it took off. Others took off in following that model and in the opportunity that I gave them, because you're starting from scratch if somebody can sell you something that's going. And so it was a wonderful opening of the economy of Jamaica, and it enabled people to be Jamaicanized in their investment. The other areas of involvement that I had that was dominant was culture. And the first decade after independence was the period of culture. There were so many things that I did that it has never been replicated. First thing was the Jamaica Festival. The introduction of the festival, giving all the young children a chance to learn the folk songs and other aspects of folk culture, and to perform them, and to have competitions with them. That was a great outlet for young people, because it was all done in the schools, and the teachers were so glad to have that help, because they wanted to be able to teach the youngsters this sort of part of their culture. And that has gone on from then until now in all its glory. But apart from festival, one of the other main things that was done was the setting up of 100 villages with community centers. That program allowed us to introduce a number of things that could be done in the community centers. Craft work, home economics, cooperatives, and sports and arts.
Mr. Seaga, you had somewhat of a meteoric rise in politics. You started out in 1959, you won your seat in 1962, you became leader of the Jamaica Labour Party in 1974. Now, in the period leading up to the 1980 elections, there was basically what could be described as an ideological battle between yourself and the Right Honourable Michael Manley, who was the leader of the People's National Party at the time. You held the view that without a strong economic base, one cannot deal effectively with the problems of the country. He, on the other hand, had the position that politics is the heart of economic underdevelopment. And this is what you said about that.
He told us that if you fix the politics, everything will go right. And the politics he referred to as socialism. And
well,
if you
some would say he didn't fix the
socialism,
politics.
it will take you to nirvana.
Yes.
Right? Well, in his fixing the politics, it took us to the edge of a cliff. So that he was the one who first started the argument that politics is the fundamental element of the equation that has to be put right.
Yes.
And we followed that to the edge of a cliff.
That was what you were referring to in terms of Mr. Manley's ideological beliefs.
Yes, well, that was Manley making the turn from what we had known beforehand as the type of ideology that we were following, which was a liberal capitalism, or in some cases populism. in making that turn, he was joining with a number of countries throughout the world which had become socialists, in which politics is the dominant feature of the society. And everything has to be geared to how it fits in with politics. And the ideology that we had before that said exactly the opposite. That politics is a part of the framework of the society, but it is not the dominant part. And so we took issue with that, and he went on to build more and more in the depth of socialism, using Fidel Castro as his model. And I took advantage of that fact, because Cuba was no example for anybody in Jamaica to want to follow. Cuba had a number of good things that were going on there, but at the same time, the life, the freedoms, and the area of productivity and ownership and so on were lacking. So I pointed those out to Jamaicans while he was pointing out the education and the health programs of Cuba. And without speaking too much about the dominance of the country's political system, in which they didn't even have elections. Mm-hmm. And we entered that, we went on that pathway for a good part of the 70s, until people began to see what politics was doing to their economy. About the middle of the 1970s, the economy started to collapse. And by the middle, the Bank of Jamaica had run out of foreign exchange. This was one of the features of an economy in which people have become fearful. They've stopped producing. They're looking to escape and to leave the country and go somewhere else and use their skills there. And that was what happened. So as the bank had less and less foreign exchange, the Bank of Jamaica, we were able to import less and less. And import permits had to be issued, and a lot of things were deemed not to be necessary. But we got down to things that were necessary too, that had to be imported but couldn't be except in the small amounts. Sometimes there were fights in supermarkets over the bag of rice that just came in and that sort of thing. So the people really began to understand in the second half of the 70s that politics was destroying their economy and this way of life that they were accustomed to. By the end of the 70s, or before the end of the 70s, that argument sharpened to the point where what Manley said was not credible anymore. People ceased to believe him. And I was predicting what was going to happen as the next step in the economy, and predicting it correctly, while he was maintaining that that would not have happened. For instance, they said in 1976 that there was not going to be a 40% devaluation come January. 1976 was when the election was held. They couldn't say anything else. But came January, there was a 40% devaluation. And it made people understand that I knew what I was talking about, and they didn't. So politics and the economy are on the same seesaw, and you'd have to try to keep a balance. Well, that went on until he lost all his credibility, and we won the 1980 election with a massive majority, massive.
I gather you won, the Jamaica Labour Party won 51 of the 60 seats that were up for grabs.
Correct.
But you know, there were whispers of intrigue, Mr. Seaga, of the JLP, and you in particular being backed by the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA. In fact, you were seen by some as a pawn by the United States in the Cold War leading up to the 1980 election. Can you please set the record straight? Is there any truth to the fact that you were being backed and you were a pawn being used by the CIA?
Michael Manley did that for me. In 1978, 78 or 79, he was on a radio show, a television show in Miami. And he was asked the question as to whether the CIA had any involvement in what was going on in Jamaica. And he said no. And he couldn't say otherwise, because it wouldn't have been the truth. And he was at that time trying to get back in the favor of the United States, because all the major trading partners had cut off credits, and there was little by way of trade going on with them. So if he lied, he would have been in deeper trouble. Mm-hmm. So he made that statement. A couple of days later, the leader of the House in Parliament here made the same statement, that there was no CIA. He said it was the mafia. Well, that of course was just a bit of a joke. Mm-hmm. So that got rid of that argument, but of course people don't really know it. They don't. It's not part of the prominent folklore of the country politically. But it never came about again after that.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, at the end of the 80s, when socialism died, Manley was at that time in an election in which he had to make a promise to the people, and to the business people in particular, that he would continue what I had been doing if he won the election. So I had set the agenda for the 70s and for the 80s.
Okay, the other thing that I wanted to ask about in the victory of 1980 was the fact that it was marred by the level of violence, unprecedented, that we have never seen before in Jamaica. Over 800 persons were killed leading up to that election. And there are people who link you to the violence. How do you react to that statement? And were you linked in any way to that violence?
I explained that in my biography when I wrote. I didn't do much to deny any involvement, because although it wasn't true, they were labeling me in such a way that they were making me a fearful person. And with that fear, it was difficult for them to be able to carry on a political work of, in some ways, because they were dealing with somebody who was going to lock them up if they lost and that sort of thing. And it worked out that way in the end, because after the election, the people who were the bad men of the 70s, on both sides, all made a dash for the United States. They migrated. They carried on some of that war over there, but they migrated from here because they thought that I was going to be very harsh with them and to not only lock them up, but that they were going to die under circumstances. So that was why the death rate dropped from 800 to 400 for every year in that period. And we have never seen that 400 again.
I know that you had, in fact, called the commissioner and turned in, so gave them several names, I think 13 names of persons who you said were responsible for violent activities and so. So you actually did turn in those names and to try and said to people, okay, this has to stop.
That was in the 80s,
yes.
Not in the 70s. In the 70s, the security forces started out by being very pro-Manley and socialism, and they ended up being very much against it because they saw what it was doing to their lives and to the lives of the country too, people in the country. I wanted to create a situation in which, as I said in my acceptance speech at my inauguration, malice towards none. And so you had to make some tolerance for those who didn't know what was right and what was wrong. The practice of that gave some room for some of the youth in Tivoli Gardens to take advantage and to go more deeply into political activity, until it came to a point when I said this had to stop. They were killing off one another. And I gave the police a list of, I forgot how many names, 15 or 20 or whatever it was, to round up these boys and query them about their activities and to see if any of them were wanted. Well, that quieted things down for a while, but not forever. But it had to be done, because I was trying to build a community and doing so very successfully up until the time that the political life of the country became militaristic. Because in a socialist country, you have to have a strong military backup, because you're telling people, give up what you own to the state. You're telling them, you do what I say, you don't have any choice. You're telling them that you don't have any vote. There's no such thing as election, and that sort of thing. That would lead people to revolt. But if you had a strong military backup, they couldn't revolt, because they would be dealing with you, using that strength and using all the cruelty that goes with that. So we had to have a strong militarism here. He couldn't get that out of the security forces. They wouldn't go along with that. But he got it out of the boys that lived in the communities of all the constituencies around West Kingston. They became the gangsters on the street, and so it created a quid pro quo into Tivoli Gardens area, and all the wars then broke out.
What were your goals when you came into power, and how did the economic recession affected those goals?
When I came into power, I had to do certain things to bring business back into the forefront, because there wasn't not only no growth, but for the 8 years that the PNP had been in power in the 70s, there was only 1 year in which there was a slight amount of growth. You could say there was no growth too. So the first thing I had to do was restore growth. Now, what was killing the business interests and their future were price controls and import controls. They made the point that if they were told that they could only make so much money out of investing and taking risks, that it wouldn't be worthwhile. And in many instances, products that would have been successful in their business had to be removed. And that's part of the reason for the fallout in the ability of the business community to operate. The same thing with the imports. If you can't import items that you need, the spare parts, hundreds of cars lying down because there's no spare parts, the other type of equipment that is necessary to make the economy run, then it just won't work. So what I did was I removed the licensing of imports. And when I did that, because by that time now we had got back a fair amount of foreign exchange to be used in the country. It wasn't like in Manley's case where if you were going abroad, they'd give you one small amount of money. And because the economy was now more open in that respect, people could bring in cheaper goods from abroad, which would not allow the local merchants to put up their prices. So if you can't put up the prices because of that, then forget the price increases. So we removed the price controls as well. And the economy straightened out and started to grow in the first 2 years. But then we had a massive recession starting in 1983. And that was like the recession of 1929 in the United States. And we had to adjust to that. Now, where we were hurt in that recession was in the extent to which bauxite and alumina prices would not sell on the open market because people were not buying the raw materials worldwide to the extent they used to. So that means that the funds that we used to get from bauxite and from alumina, royalties, etc., went down. Now, unfortunately for us, it didn't go down and stay down. It went down a little bit, then it went down more and more, and we never knew when the changes were going to be made. So we couldn't even keep track of it and saying our budget is going to provide so much foreign exchange for the year, because in another couple of months it would have gone down again. So we had to go the route of a new IMF agreement. Manley had rejected the IMF and the IMF agreement that they offered him. But I had to take it, and it was 3 times as bad. They wanted him to fire 10,000 people in the public sector, because what he had done is he had packed up the public sector to provide work. And he said no, he wasn't going to do it. And so they didn't get a chance to have an agreement with him. When it came to my time, because they knew that I understood the role of a large labor force that you can't afford and that's not producing, they said you have to now get rid of 30,000. Well, of course, that had never happened in Jamaica. And that damaged me considerably electorally. But I had to swallow that, because this was what was good for the country. I couldn't have done it otherwise. We had to cut the expenditure of the budget, and the only place you could cut it was in the wages of employment.
And it was a bitter medicine for Jamaicans to swallow.
Very bitter, very bitter. It grieved me very much. But the total number of persons then employed after that in a civil service was 70,000. Before that it was 100,000. But when we were down to 70,000, we started to grow. Yeah. Because the savings from that allowed us to do things that would make the country grow.
There were other things that you did despite all the challenges that we're still reaping the benefits from. There was a National Development Bank that you helped to implement, the Agricultural Credit Bank, the National Investment Bank of Jamaica, the Export-Import Bank, Jamaica National Investment Promotions, which is now JAMPRO, were all put in by you in the 80s.
Yes, that's part of that group of financial institutions that I created. The Agricultural Credit Bank was a bit of an experiment, because there were little banks around all over the country, little people's banks. And that's where the farmers used to go. But so many of them had run into financial trouble in the 70s that they had no money to lend and they were in deep debt. So we weeded them out and took out the best of the bunch and make sure that they were in geographical areas that would be easily reached by the farmers in the community, and started to rebuild those with some international aid. And that's where farmers went. You can't get a farmer to go into a multi-story, high-rise building and talk to people about loans that he wants, because his loan is far too small for being of any interest. So he's intimidated right away. So the Agricultural Credit Bank was not a success in my view. It was there now for big agriculture. But the country wouldn't accept big agriculture. We had it in sugar and bananas, and we were having plenty of trouble with those. And we weren't going to go into other crops that would have taken the place of the reduction of sugar and banana. So the Agricultural Credit Bank wasn't the route to go on that one.
But there were other policies that you put in place that seem to have had measure of success. One of the things that you did was to put in something that created an initial spark in the telecommunications industry, and that is Digiport.
Yes. That was at the end of my period as Prime Minister. We had we realized that the world was now beginning to see something that was brand new, telecommunications on a different level. Up until that time, if you wanted to send a picture overseas, it would be very distorted using the technology that existed then. And if you wanted to do any copies of anything, you had to put it on a Gestetner machine and roll it off. And things that held up the whole system of business. So we decided to introduce the modern technology. And the party that we spoke with that was most influential would be Cable and Wireless, because they were the communication giant. They were a monopoly. And we made a deal with them to take back some of the powers that they had and to give them other powers. One of the things that we did was to open the field to operations abroad that would like to have certain parts of their business carried further offshore than onshore, because of the costs onshore was higher than the offshore costs. Doctors who did a lot of writing on their patients and that sort of thing, they would send these down by the internet, and the young people who we had employed would then transcribe them, send them back in another form. And there were many other ways, including the answering of calls from overseas and that sort of thing. I call it the Digiport. It was hugely successful. In the very first year, we had hundreds of young people that flocked to it. We had to close down a youth camp and turn it into a training institution, locale for youth camp. And I had expected that if we had gone on after 1989 to open enough of those to give you 10,000 young people employed, because it was so attractive to them.
Another attractive thing that you did, Mr. Seaga, was you put in place the food aid program. There was the Golden Age Home. There was the National Committee for Drug Abuse. There was also the redevelopment of the Kingston waterfront. Internationally, you were part of the Caribbean Basin Initiative. And also, there was also the concept of a manpower bank, which was later adopted by the UNDP.
Yes. When people retire, some people feel that that is the end of their lives. And some people feel, I can still work. There's a lot of things I can do. But employers are not willing to hire people at that age because they can't give them in policy, can't give them insurance, and they can't give them other forms of protection. So we said, well, that wide pool of people who have retired but would like to go on to do other things, why doesn't the United Nations make them available to countries that are lacking in that kind of skills and at that kind of level of leadership? And we can draw on those pools for people to come to Jamaica and help us in that respect. I called it the Manpower Bank, but they changed it up. I gave it another name that has the initials STAS. I don't remember what it stood for. But it was used by us, and I don't know what happened, because that was right in the late 1980s, and it was soon after that I lost track of what happened.
Now, you lost state power in 1989. The JLP lost power in 1989, and you also lost the parish council election in 1990. There was a lot of internal pressure on you as party leader. What was seen as your iron leadership style led to a lot of criticism, especially from some of the senior members of the party. This led to what became known as a Gang of Five. The five were Colonel Charles, Douglas Vaz, Carl Samuda, Errol Anderson, and Ed Bartlett. Let's take a look at what you had to say to the Gang of Five in 1990.
And today I say to them, The door is open to retrieve your position. Take a candle, sing a Sankey, and find your way back home.
I've never tried to replace Mr. Seaga, but I have the ambition to follow him.
It is Mr. Seaga who is at fault, not the 5 members here standing accused right now.
I'm not just senior, I'm very senior in this parliament and in this party. I remain a member of parliament. I intend to continue.
There has not been a shred of evidence, credible evidence that is, to substantiate any of the charges that have been trumped up against me in particular, and all of us together.
They have not taken away my right to speak. They have given me the right to speak on every topic. And come next time, I am going to be there.
All of a sudden, everybody turned on. You better learn that in any organization, it's only one done by rule.
The one done gone rule, like it, young singer Sankey. Mr. Seaga, your leadership style has come in for a lot of criticism, and this was just part of it. What do you have to say about your leadership style?
I've always been someone who has been very firm. From my school days, as I said earlier, when I had leadership roles in the school, I've always been someone who believed in discipline. Got into trouble in school in that respect. I had to shout down a master of the school who was on the sidelines shouting instructions to me in a game of hockey where I should pass the ball to, and naturally that cut off my passes. And I had to tell her, why don't you shut your mouth? And the next morning I was standing before the headmaster. I was a prefect in the school, and I could see that he understood. But he said, I have to suspend you for a while. I said, okay, fine. The fact of the matter is that without discipline, and this country needs discipline, this country doesn't have enough discipline. And without discipline, you can't go anywhere. So I don't mind what people want to say about me in terms of whether I was marking too hard, as they call it. The fact of the matter is that if you want to get a result, you have to ensure that you can put the people in a position where they can do it, and not to tolerate the slackness of work that isn't being done, that should be done.
Do you think in part that you're a victim of deliberate demonization by the local media when they talk about what it is you do and how you did it?
That's so. I didn't bring about the word, I didn't introduce the word demonization. The press did. There were those in the press who could see what was happening, and they pointed out that I was being demonized. Well, obviously no one wants to be demonized, but it helps you in another way, because people are more inclined to hear what you have to say and to do what you need to do if you have a characteristic of being strong and forceful. And that's a characteristic that the press reinforced, because I felt that people would believe that more than anything else.
Okay, I'd like to read you a quote, and it is from the late Professor Carl Stone. He wrote, "He, meaning you, is a difficult man to get along with, very demanding. In a low-intensity work culture in which most people operate at 30% of their capacity, Mr. Seaga puts out 100%, which is the main reason he is disliked by his colleagues. He believes in tight party discipline and a strong chain of command that runs the party more like a military structure than a democratic organ. He has sacrificed democracy for organizational discipline. He gets away with it because he's better able to get things done than any other politician in this country." Do you think that is an apt description by Professor Carl Stone of you?
Yes, it is. And I must say that Carl and I were never close in the political field. I was the subject of most of his barbs. But he was the one who pointed out to the Gang of Five that not one of them has ever confronted me personally to complain about my leadership style and to tell me what they were complaining about. As a matter of fact, anytime I was confronted about being hard and people who wanted to replace me, I said, there's only one place that the Constitution allows for replacement, and that is at the annual conference of the party. Meet me on the conference floor. Nobody turned up, except one, Mike Henry. Quite late down in the period, I think about 87, 88. I'm sorry, we're not talking in that period now. 2001. And he wanted to challenge me, and I said, fine, wonderful. Well, we had the runoff in Parliament, and I won with 90% of the vote. And a lot of the people who were in the media, who were condemning me for being strong, said, but Mr. Seaga has control of the party, how you get 90% like that? He has control of the party, and that's what you need. And they turned around. And it was from there that we started to climb out back.
Now, Mr. Seaga, right throughout your career, your love of culture and passion for cultural development did not wane. In fact, there were a few raised eyebrows when in 1982 you invited the religious leader Malika Capo Reynolds to put out a revival table at Jamaica House. And, you know, persons were like, but I want you to look at this clip and tell me, just to jog your memory.
I said, I'm Capo. Amen. One of the oldest revival in Jamaica. Amen. I am the shepherd that you see here. He's the two oldest revival man in Jamaica. Amen. But it's because we are disciplined. Why we are here until now. Amen. I am asking all revival mothers, hallelujah, to be disciplined and walk this straight way, because the Prime Minister has given to us a piece of gold in our hand. Amen. Let us cherish it. Amen. Because time gone past, you couldn't dare to march out on the street. More than to take someone vehicle from different parts of Jamaica to come here, you would be kicked down, you would be gunned down, and you would be called who would be a man. Amen, Jesus. Amen. Now tonight, I am asking revival people to be happy. When I came here, I did good works in revival. I went back to the United States and came back a patriot.
Put on him a young boot, better mind him step by you. Oh, we are going to walk with God on that great day, on that great day. Oh, we are going to walk with God on that great day, on that great day. Oh, we are going to walk with God on that great day. Shall we praise the Lord? Praise Him again! Praise Him again! Praise Him again! Brother David said, the Lord is my light.
I have been to more than 100 of these ceremonies. From 1953, in this one of the districts that I lived in, Buxton Town, there was a Zion church at the foot of the hill. Zion is a bit different from revival, which is the name that the Pocomania people prefer to be called, because of how they treat the spirits. Both accept that spirits can possess you, and the Bible speaks of that. Mm-hmm. One feels that the spirit can be used to do good, and the other feels that the spirit can be used to do evil and good. So that is the distinction between them. But the music is just absolutely moving. The drum chorus behind the music would make you feel like joining in whatever is going on. And those scenes that you have shown there are unfortunately not the scenes when the actual opportunity is available to the people, because it's a massive crowd of people, and inside there's a ring with some space. And that's where the Spirit takes you. And that's where you perform any of many roles that you can have in the church. I wanted the people to understand that this was part of their national religion. I'm not asking anybody to join. You don't ask people to join in religion. But you want to know that this is something that is part of your religion. It came from the Mayal of the days of slavery. And it was Christianized as it went along. And this is where we are now. There's a lot of Christian elements in that. But it's how the people express themselves. And there are more Zion churches across the country than any other church.
And that great day, and that great day, oh, we are gonna walk with God, and that great day, and that great day, oh, we are gonna walk with God, and that great day. Shall we praise the Lord? Praise Him again, praise Him again, praise Him again. Brother David said, the Lord is my life.
You are passionately loved and hated in equal measure for the unwavering focus and the sense of purpose that you have. To your admirers, purpose.
Oh, purpose.
That you have. To your admirers, you did good out of the conviction that you were right. To your detractors, you did bad for precisely the same reason. What is your response?
Well, I don't know how anybody can blame you for being strong insofar as the passion of love is concerned. I love the people. I don't go around telling people that I love them, but I love to work with the people of Jamaica. When the time came for me to select a seat, and I made up my mind in 1962 that I would go forward as a candidate, I decided to select the West Kingston seat, which was where I had done my research. And the party hierarchy didn't understand that. They looked at me and said, "You're going to be killed down there." I said, "Well, I've been there before, I'm going back again." And I grew from strength to strength. Those people who begrudge you for that, and it is a begrudging reaction to take, is because they're not able to get people to understand that they want strong leadership. The people who want strong leadership, but they want it in a delicate way. They want it in a loving way.
Since retiring from active politics in 2005, you have donned another hat as a scholar. You were given a job as a senior research fellow at the University of the West Indies Mona campus and chancellor of the University of Technology in 2010. You have also been writing.
Yes, I didn't get the job. No. I was given the award of Distinguished Fellow. It's not something that pays. Nobody here tells me what to do. I have office space, and I do what I can and what I want. And that's why and when I wrote my autobiography of 2 volumes, I had the time. Being Chancellor of UTech is not a paying post. I'm only there as a symbol. That's what chancellors do. They don't operate as part of management or any administration. They are just there as a symbol of the type of person that is in that institution for others outside to say, oh, it must be a good place because that person is the person at the top. So neither of those improved my living conditions. But it gave me the satisfaction of being able to academically use the opportunity to do things that I had wanted to do in the earlier days when I decided to follow the political route and not go the academic route.
Okay. We have looked at Edward Seaga, the legislator, the anthropologist, the social reformer, the politician and scholar, but what of the Edward Seaga, the family man? You have 3 children with your first wife, Mitzi, 2 sons, Christopher and Andrew, and a daughter, Annabelle. And you have another daughter, Gabrielle, with your second wife, your current wife, Carlo. Now, I wanted to ask, because I've heard it, but I'm not sure, I've never read it. Is your first son, Christopher, adopted?
Yes. He is an adopted child. But we don't repeat that word. We don't talk about it that way. As far as we are concerned, Christopher is a son. Mm-hmm. And there he is right behind you.
Now, your first wife, Elizabeth, Mitzi Constantine, described you as shy. She described you as shy.
Shy, yes.
Right. And she also had this to say about you.
He is bright.
Yes.
There's a gentle side to Edward Seaga.
Gently.
Really.
Yes.
Yes. The tyrant that the people portray him as, I don't know that person. I don't know the tyrant at all, no. I don't know. I know a man that's impatient, that he likes to get things done. He is creative. He has foresight, and he's bright. And he doesn't have patience with people that give excuses, you know. He doesn't understand that I can't, or it can't be done. He's a man that I respect.
You still respect?
Of course I do.
Yes.
Yes, he's the father of my children. He is an honest man, very honest. I think that's what I respect about him most of all, is honesty. I remember once he told me that the most dishonest thing that he ever did was in the 70s when they had abandoned bird shooting.
Bird shooting.
And he went out and stole a shoot one Sunday, and he felt so bad about it. And he said, I said, Eddie, this must be the most dishonest. He said, yes, it is. He felt terrible, but he just, you know, he just loves bird shooting, and that's the one thing that really relaxes him. And I thought that he was going to go crazy. And there were a bunch of fellas that were going out to Portland, and they said, come, Eddie, man.
You're passionate about bird shooting, but it's not only about bird shooting. I'm told you're passionate about gardening as well.
Yes,
gardening and landscaping.
Yeah, there's that side of me that very few people know about. Matter of fact, I've given up bird shooting, although it's been in the family from I was a little child and before. Something happened. I shot a bird, and the fellow who was with me went to pick it up, and he put it down beside me, and the bird wasn't dead. And I noticed that it still had a wing like that, going like that, lying on its side. And it looked up at me. Why did you shoot me? What have I done you? I took my gun, I broke it, put it away, and I haven't had a shot since then.
Is that when you became involved in gardening, or gardening was always something you liked to do?
No. I love beautiful things. I love beautiful flowers, beautiful women. Not to say you don't like other types of things, but you know, there's a premium. And I love art because it is beautiful. I love the majesty of sports because there are the beautiful stroke play of a good game of cricket. And then there's the wham-bam hitting the ball out of the park. That's not a good cricket stroke, but it gives excitement. You have to appreciate all these things, and I love them all.
You also love football because you became even more involved in football, the Tivoli Gardens Football Club, and with Premier League.
Yeah. Well, the Premier League consists of 12 clubs, and in the old days, up to 2008, the clubs would get about $700 each, $700,000 each to spend from the Jamaica Football Federation. And I can't do anything. Can't do anything. So I mounted a campaign and went to the sponsors who were providing at that time $24 million to the JFF. And I said to them, the JFF owns a title to the league. Jamaica Football Federation owns a title, so they can declare a sponsor. But that sponsor will not be able to put anything on the shirt to advertise your product because we own the shirt. So let's talk deals now. And in the end it turned around that we have over the years gone to the point where we are nearly $500,000 per month to each team. For 10 months, that's $5 million, as against 700,000.
Excellent. Now, you have, before I go there, your current wife, Carla, speaks about your level of commitment and to the caliber of the person that you are. We have a quick bite from her here that I'd like you to look at.
He's very goal-oriented. A lot of people think they're successful because they're busy with activities. He makes sure that he knows where he wants to go and that he's actually getting there. It's not just a matter of being busy. You have to achieve the goal. That's a big strength.
That is true. I work two goals. I don't just do things. I set my targets and I set my agenda. People see me carry around a little black book. Sometimes I use a cell phone to do it. I'm always making notes of what is to be done. And that's how you get things done. You can't expect the brain to carry everything. And especially someone like me who has a very wide area of interest, it wouldn't be possible. And you have to set your goals and you have to move towards them. You have to set your plans to get towards them.
Given your years of experience,
yes,
given the politics of this country,
yeah,
what is your suggestion about setting the right benchmark so we know we're making progress and moving in the right direction?
Well, progress comes with success. You build on success. The next round is always more easy to achieve because you have been successful. And success comes with hard work. Hard work by you in teaching, in thinking, and in planning. But hard work by the people who you must get to try to follow you in doing that. So it's not a single thing you can stick your finger on. You have to have a composition of features in an individual that will be able to teach by experience, leading the way by experience, doing so firmly but with compassion. And then you have to have the love for the benefit that you see that has come about. My greatest joy in politics is when I see somebody that comes to me and says, you helped me to do so and so. You sent my little child to school, and I have a number of those. You helped to build such and such a place and you gave me the chance. Those are the things that really make me feel good. And that's what I work for.
Mm-hmm. How would you like to be remembered?
That's a very difficult question for me, because there's so many things that I have enjoyed doing and I've been successful in doing, that it would be hard for me to pick any one. Some might, putting them together, say, well, what you did for the Kingston waterfront and Noche Rios in particular were so magnificent that they would rate #1. That's true. But heart also has to rate very high, because you're building it a different way. You're building the mind of the people. When I try to get people to understand their religion, I'm trying to help them to build their souls. And when I indulge in so many other areas that I love, it is because I have a passion for beauty. I have a passion for the way in which things are done. the credibility of what is done and the extent to which the perfection of it is achieved.
Okay, Mr. Seaga, I want to thank you very much for taking the time to have this open, frank discussion with us.
Thank you very much indeed.
BGLC, the regulatory body. We regulate, you play without worry. We regulate, you play. BGLC, fair play when you play. For the fun of the game, you know when they are. BGLC, keep it fair for the player. You play the game and we are the rules setter. Keep everything fair so the game play better. The Betting, Gaming and Lotteries Commission. We ensure fairness, integrity and responsible gaming practices. Keep the game fair and fun for everyone. We regulate, you play.
Today, we can report 2 consecutive years of reduction in major crimes and murders with a significant